is Nato at the nest with an update on the Cold War. Viper is currently passed out, so I'll be doing the narration for this one. It's 1948, start of 1948, and I guess we'll just start at the right side of the board and work our way across. You see America's building its forces back up. Historically, after World War II, America started de-arming and substantially reduced its everything, Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever. It started demobilizing pretty much everything it had until it realized it was going to have a contender in the Soviet Union and gradually started building back up again. So that's what America's built so far. Now America has a production of 52, but vast majority of that money is going to funding NATO and supporting various nations that rely on NATO funding to build their military. So American production is actually quite slow. They were 5 turns into it, and that's pretty much what America's been able to build. Same thing with Japan. That's all Japan's been able to build, because Japan is part of NATO and its money is being sent to support other NATO nations like South Korea that rely almost completely on NATO funding to build its military, to get ready for when North Korea comes stampeding across. The Chinese Civil War, which is the first proxy war and will give the first victory point to NATO or Warsaw, is going pretty good for Communist China. As you can see, they're steadily pushing the KMT China back till they're pretty much got their backs against the wall. Indochina is rebelled against France. That's the second proxy war. Indochina used to be a French colony during World War II. It was taken over by the Japanese, got it back after World War II, and then subsequently lost it again to what will become the Vietnamese. So Indochina's rebelled, and there's France sending forces to try to get it back and keep it. The first of several Pakistan Indian wars has began, and the first assault did not go well for India, as I think they managed to inflict 1 casualty on Pakistan for 4 of their own, so it didn't go so well for India. Our third proxy war has started this round is in the first Arab-Israeli war. There hasn't been any attack yet, but that will happen this round. The Pakistan-Indian War is an event, not a proxy war, so it won't count towards the Cold War victory points. The Arab-Israeli War will. Greek Civil War is still stalemated. That's an event too, so it doesn't count towards points one or the other. But whichever faction, or whichever faction wins, whether it be NATO or Warsaw wins, will be able to use Greece as a base when World War III kicks off. And I say when because there's 3 possible times of when it can start. It can start, at the planned start date of the last scenario in the Wars of the World series. So in 2050, the planned World War III start. But depending on player choice and actions, there are two different points in the Cold War where World War III can be started prematurely, depending on player action. So whichever side managed to win the Civil War in Greece will be able to use Greece as a Greece will join that faction and that faction will be able to use Greece as a staging base for World War III. So if NATO manages to gain control of Greece, that will give NATO a base to either drive up south into the Soviet flank or head east into the Islamic Caliphate. Or if the Warsaw Pact wins, that'll give Russia a pretty good foothold in the Mediterranean that will force the NATO nations to adjust accordingly to counter. Let's see. Italy, Germany are just building up forces. France is building transports and dudes to send to Indochina to try to get it back. I see there's some American units in Germany, 2 air transports and infantry to help bolster the Germans. England just completed a fleet carrier, put out a cruiser and a couple ground units. Algeria is building up for their eventual rebellion against France. Then there's a espionage, spy element. So America has got some spies in Russia, in Smolensk, headed by the CIA. But on the flip side, Russia has got some spies in New York, by KGB. So superpowers are spying on each other, and that, depending on who wins the espionage of that round, will take away some IPPs from the loser, whether it be United States or Soviet Russia. Both the United States and Russia are trying to gain influence in South Africa. They both have a point in it so far. First one to get to 6 points gains influence over the country, and then when World War III kicks off, they'll be able to align that country and then use it as a base. So the United States and the Soviets are tied 1 point apiece in trying to influence South Africa. That factory being the only factory, aside from the Caliphate, the only factory in Africa, will give a pretty substantial advantage to whoever can start off World War III with that in their pocket. The Soviets are continuing to influence Cuba, while America is continuing to focus on influencing Latin America. And that should be a 3, not a 4. Excuse me. And that's pretty much it. So the new thing to watch for this turn is the Arab-Israeli conflict flaring up. And then next turn, Russia will have the option of blockading Berlin and cutting it off, in which case America will have the opportunity to attempt the Berlin airlift. These are optional. Neither side has to do this, and there's penalties. There's gains and there's penalties to doing or not doing these events. So we'll see what Viper decides to do, whether or not she wants to blockade Berlin, and if she does, we'll have to see if I consider attempting the Berlin airlift is worth it. Hence why I have those 2 air transports sitting there. So with that, we will cut the video here and play a couple more rounds and throw some dice, preferably not at each other, and see what happens. See you then. And because I always forget something, one more thing happened. Yugoslavia left the Warsaw Pact. As the for those of you who know your history, that's the Tito-Stalin split. And then it was over the civil war in Greece. Tito thought that Stalin wasn't doing enough to support the communist rebels in Greece, and was pushing for Stalin to send more aid and weapons and supplies. And Stalin was hesitant and up to the point of almost stopped sending supplies to Greece, because he had made an agreement with Churchill back in '44 called the Percentages Agreement, where Stalin agreed that Greece would be a sphere, would be in England's sphere, and that Stalin promised Churchill that he would stay out of it. So Stalin, well, through all of his faults, was actually pretty solid on his commitments. When he made a promise, he was pretty solid in keeping it. So Stalin, trying to keep his agreement with Churchill back in '44, only sent limited supplies to Greece, to the communist rebels in Greece, and Tito, a hardline communist and the Yugoslavian dictator, didn't like that, and so Tito withdrew Yugoslavia from the Warsaw Pact and broke off. So that took $3 away from Russia. Russia went from 73 to 70. And that sounds like a lot. They're in the same boat as America in terms of having to support other nations. Actually, they're in worse spot than America. America America right now only has to support 2 other countries, Israel and South Korea, whereas Russia has to support North Korea, Indochina, Algeria, Argentina, and Communist China. So that 73, well now 70, evaporates away pretty quickly, and so when it's all said and done, Russia only has about $20–25 to work with to buy its own stuff, because the other 50 of it has gone to supporting its other commitments around the world. Like I said, whether it be funding other communist nations like North Korea and China and Indochina, or supporting its espionage commitments around the world. So Yugoslavia has left the Warsaw Pact, brought Russia down in production a little bit. Not detrimental, going from 73 to 70 is not a death blow, but as all you players out there know, every dollar counts. So with that, we will come back with the next update. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the update on the Cold War. So, we just finished the first half of the 1948 turn, and the major things that happened, or the important things that happened. I see America still gearing up for building its forces. I see it put out F-86 Sabres and Sky Sharks, and building up its ground forces to potentially intervene in Korea if it so chooses. Communist China is still steadily pushing south. KMT's pretty much got their backs up against the wall and don't know how much longer they can hold out. They still have some strength though. That's a 7 stack of infantry there. And they still got some forces in the far west of China, and then a couple of infantry in the deep south of China. The Indo-China, the rebellion continues. France has finally just arrived, not with much, but hopefully you can see they got transports going all the way back to France, so hopefully France can build up quickly and take the fight to the rebels and hopefully defeat them. Extremely unlikely, but there's always hope. And both the Chinese Civil War and the Indochina War are Cold War victory points, and both of them are going very badly for NATO, so those are probably points that will go to the Warsaw Pact. The Indo-Pakistan War event went a lot better for India this turn. The turn previous, India kind of got their asses handed to them and lost a lot of units without taking down very many Pakistan, but this time it was the reverse. India only lost 1 infantry unit, but they managed to take down 2 or 3 Pakistani infantry, so it went a lot better for India this time. The Arab-Israeli war went very badly for the Caliphate. They attacked Israel. They managed to take out a militia and a fighter, but it cost them an artillery, a heavy tank, and 3 infantry to do it, so it did not go well for the Arabs at all. And the Greek Civil War continues. The communist rebels lost a unit. The monarchists, supported by NATO, didn't lose any. The influence contest in South Africa ended in a draw. Russia rolled a 2, America rolled a 2, so it was a tie, so no one got the point. So South Africa is still tied at one point apiece in terms of influence. Russia has continued to influence Cuba. They got 4 points, so now they only need 2 more points to gain influence over Cuba. And same thing with America and Latin America. They only need 2 more points to gain that. The Russian spies are spreading. There's now 2 Russian spies in America, but at the same token there's 2 American spies in Russia, so the Cold War superpowers are trading spies on a regular basis, and then other than that, everyone else is just building up as best they can with their meager resources. The next event coming up, the next turn, is Russia will have the opportunity to blockade Berlin. Even though there's a Russian roundel in Berlin, half of the territory's production goes to Germany, to simulate the fact that historically Berlin was divided, cut in half, East and West Berlin, East being under control of the Soviet Union and the West being under control of NATO. So next turn, Russia will have the option to blockade Berlin and cut off those 4 IPPs to Germany. And in response, if America wants to challenge that, it can institute the Berlin airlift. Hence why America has 2 C-47 transport planes and those supply tokens. If it wants to contest the blockade, America has to load those supplies on those transport planes and fly them into Berlin. And if it can fly supply tokens equal to the amount of production being cut off and sustain that until the end of the Berlin airlift, they will win the event. So that's what's coming up next turn, and we'll see if Russia decides to attempt to do that or not. Russia doesn't have to do it. It's optional. Likewise, America doesn't have to contest it. But given it's me and Viper playing, I highly doubt that either one of us will take the easy way out. So we'll come back with the second half of 1948 and see where the Cold War is at with that. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the update, another update for the Cold War. And this was the end of 1948 turn. And see, America dumped a lot of transports, so getting geared up for the Korean War, getting ready to come across the pond. See, Russia put a spy in San Francisco. See, the Chinese Civil War continues to go good for CCP. They got the KMT backed up against a wall, and it's not looking like KMT is going to be able to hold out much longer. We got the first fight in Indochina between France and the Indochinese rebels. Losses are pretty equal on both sides. The Indo-Pakistan War continues. India continued to do better this round. If you remember the first fight between those two, India got his butt kicked, but they're continuing to do better. Only got one turn left on that before that ends. The first Israeli-Arab War is over. That ended with a crushing Israeli victory. And that is the end of the first proxy war, so that's the first point towards victory in the Cold War. So the score stands at 1-0 in NATO's favor. So NATO has a point, Warsaw Pact has none so far. But that'll change as it looks like a communist victory in China, so that'll give the Warsaw Pact a point, and then kind of doubt France is going to win Indochina, so that'll be another. So it'll probably be 2-1 in Warsaw's favor very soon. The Greek Civil War continues to more or less stalemate. They're trading equal losses they have for the last 3 turns. America successfully supplied Berlin in the Berlin airlift. So if America can keep that up again, they'll win the event. As you can see, America's got the transports and the supplies already in position to deliver. And then America won the influence contest for South Africa, so they've pulled ahead 2-1. Like I said, first 1 to 6 points, gains influence over the country, and then they'll be able to use that as a base and station units when World War III kicks off. And then Russia and America continue to gain influence in their respective zones, Cuba and Latin America. So could potentially see our first influenced countries next turn, with Cuba going to Russia and Latin America going to America. And other than that, that's about it. The intelligence and counterintelligence continues. Fight between America and Russia continues to grow, as you see the growing number of spies on the board. But with that, we will cut it there, and we'll come back with what happens in 1949, the beginning of 1949. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with another update on the Cold War. This is just got done with the first half of 1949, and America has started moving across the Pacific, so it's moving all that stuff across to get ready for Korea. You can see the new planes are coming out. So you got America's got F-86 Sabres and the A-1 Sky Sharks, and new bombers is building and getting ready to fight Korea. Let's see. China is pretty much got one turn left, but it's pretty much decided. KMT is completely surrounded right there. So it's pretty much guaranteed that CCP is going to win, so that'll be a point for the Warsaw Pact. Indochina, the rebels, for lack of a better term, attacked the French and whittled them down to 1 infantry, but then France landed some reinforcements. The Indo-Pakistan War is over as well. India almost pulled it off, whittled it down to Pakistan down to 1 infantry and 2 artillery. But Pakistan survived, so India will not be able to claim it. America has won the Berlin airlift event, so Germany gets its half of Berlin production back, and Russia goes down 2 and America goes up 2 on the production chart for political clout gained or lost. And Cuba has been successfully influenced by Russia, so got the Warsaw Pact roundel on there. And likewise, Latin America has been successfully influenced by NATO, so I've got the NATO flag on there. So the fight for influence over South Africa continues with another American success, so it's now standing at 3-1 in America's favor. Oh, the Greek Civil War is over. The monarchs have won. They eliminated the last pocket of communist rebels. So Greece will remain solidly in the NATO corner. Fortunately, unfortunately, depending on who you're rooting for. And because there is a potential that the Korean War could kick off World War III early, Russia has begun moving its stuff to its European border between itself and the rest of the NATO nations, just in case the proxy war of Korea blows up into a full-scale global war. But if that happens, that's totally dependent on American actions, which we'll get to when that happens. So other than that, that was it. We'll come back with another video with the second half of 1949, and we'll see where the world's at then. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the second half of 1949 in the Cold War. Not too much happened. is America continuing to build up its forces in Asia to be in position if it decides to intervene when the Korean War kicks off. It's not mandatory that America does, it's optional for them. Just like it'll be optional for China if it wants to intervene in Korea as well. But at the very least, America is getting forces in position if it does decide to. So it's moved over strategic bomber, flew over some special forces on that C-47, and then of course there's that American Army there and a Navy sitting there, as well as another bomber and a submarine that America put out. And America moved in infantry into Berlin to participate in the joint occupation of the city. And then America has begun to build up forces on the eastern seaboard. Those two C-47s that were doing the Berlin airlift are no longer needed in Europe, so America started flying them back. And see what else. America started construction on another carrier and another cruiser. And then the biggest news of the turn is the Chinese Civil War is over. The CCP, or the Communist Chinese, have won, so China is now communist. And that gives a victory point for the Warsaw Pact, so it is now tied up 1-1. The NATO alliance with a point, and the Warsaw Pact with a point. The Indo-Chinese rebels fighting France is still stalemated, with France gaining a little bit in terms of numbers. That's the highest number count they've had in French Indochina so far. And then with both Cuba and Latin America secured to their respective alliances, the espionage game has moved solely into Africa, with Russia going into Nubia to try to influence them. America followed, tried to contest it, but Russia won the influence contest, so Russia now is 1-0 in terms of points in Nubia in influence. And South Africa tied. Russia rolled a 6, so it looked like it was almost guaranteed that Russia was going to close that gap, but America managed to roll a 6 as well, so they tied out, so no one got a point, but America still maintains its 3-1 lead in South Africa. And this round had the first spy versus spy contest. Russia went after the American spy in Kiev, but was unable to find him. And vice versa, America went after the Russian spy in New York, but was unable to find him either. So the spy game has now entered the hunt and prey phase to try to eliminate each other's agents in their home countries. France completed a carrier, put out a carrier. Doesn't have any plans to put on it yet, but we're working on it. Communist China has started construction of an airfield in Peking. Now that it's won the Civil War, jet fighters now unlocked for Communist China, but per the rules, because jet fighters need actual runways, they can't just take off from fields, grass fields like World War II planes could. All jet planes need an actual runway, so they can only operate from airfields. So China's begun construction of an airfield so it can start fielding some jet planes. And that's it for that was pretty much it for the turn. Russia just continued to build its forces, build up its fleet a little bit, put out a submarine, and that was it. So we'll come back and it's a new decade. It's now 1950, and for you, all those people out there that know their history, you all know what happens in 1950. So, and has nothing to do with where my camera's pointed at right now. So we'll see you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the update on the first half of 1950. And this will be a short video because not much happened. The only fighting was the war in Indochina. It was an even trade, 1-for-1. France lost a militia. The Indochinese rebels lost an infantry. And that's the only fighting going on right now. In terms of espionage, the contest over Nubia ended in a tie, so it's still 1-0 in Russia's favor. America won the influence contest in this round in South Africa, so it's sitting at 4-1. And that's pretty much it. The build-up continues for the conflict in Korea. America moved over another bomber and moved its air transports from Germany over to San Francisco and put in another fighter and 2 more infantry to be airlifted over. Like I said, it's not required, it's optional that America intervene, but given that it moved its fleet into the Sea of Japan with fully loaded transports and another bomber, and what looks like more coming, it's looking like America is showing that it will intervene. So in response, China has started moving all of its forces north, so it can potentially intervene when its window opens. China completed its airfield, so China can start producing fighters to counter the American air dominance. The hunt for spies, respectively, Russia didn't find the American spy in Kiev, and likewise America didn't find the Russian spy in New York. America continuing to build up its Atlantic fleet, put down a destroyer, and continued its production on carrier and cruiser. Israel and the Caliphate both started construction on airfields. Seems how both of them have fighter planes unlocked to them. They can start producing fighter planes now. With China no longer at war, it can start giving money to the Warsaw Pact. Previously it's been Russia fronting the bill by itself this entire time. So now that China's not at war, it can start contributing to the faction fund, so taking a little pressure off of Russia and allowing Russia to keep a little bit more money for itself to build up its own forces. And that's pretty much it. Next turn is the second half of 1950 and the start of the Korean War. So we'll see the North and South start to duke it out, and we'll see if America intervenes or not. And if America intervenes, it's almost guaranteed that China will intervene too, because North Korea won't be able to survive against South Korea and America. Consequences if America intervenes, obviously America will then be at war, and so America, the largest contributor to the NATO alliance, won't be able to contribute to it, and so it'll be up to all the smaller NATO nations, England, France, Germany, so on, to contribute to the fund. So NATO output will be drastically reduced. And same thing if China decides to intervene as well. China won't be able to contribute to the fund until it'll be back to Russia fronting the entire bill for the Warsaw Pact. But that's kind of the focus of this scenario. It's more about resource management than the actual fighting. The actual fighting's kind of more secondary, and the resource management is the emphasis, and there's plenty of events and proxy wars sprinkled throughout it that have pros and cons to their outcomes. And most of the events have several options that one nation or the other can take, and each option has its pros and cons to it and consequences as well. So I probably won't be making a video for every turn like we've done in the past, just especially because some parts of this not much will change. So we'll probably just do videos whenever something changes, like a new event happens, or a new war happens, or a war ends. So there will be sections where we jump a couple turns, jump a couple years, but we'll come back next turn with the second half of 1950 and the start of the Korean War, and see if America intervenes or not. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the update on the Cold War, and we just got done with the what was it? Second half of 1950, and the Korean War kicked off, and America did choose to intervene. North Korea invaded, and it didn't go so well for them. The combined South Korean American forces really took a toll on North Korean numbers, and then the South Korean counterattack reduced their forces to just that. And then the influence roles in Africa. Russia continues to win in Nubia, but is failing miserably in South Africa. And America found the Russian spy in New York and eliminated him. And other than that, that's it. America continued to build its Atlantic fleet, and America is setting up a relay system between North Korea and Hawaii to ferry troops across the Pacific as fast as possible. And that was about it. So we'll come back next turn, 1951, and see if China intervenes or not. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with another Cold War update. It's the first half of 1951, and the star of the show is still the Korean War. China did intervene and launched an all-out attack against South Korea. You can see the initial wave of Chinese forces didn't go so well. It used to be a much bigger stack, but the combined South Korean and American firepower has proven to be pretty lethal. But it's just like history. What China lacks in firepower, more makes up for with manpower. So we still got plenty of troops coming, and then all those stacks coming in behind it. America has started construction of a third fleet, and getting prepared to be able to cover all of its far-flung world commitments. And let's see. Russia was able to find the American spy in Kiev and eliminate it. And on the espionage front, Russia and America managed to tie Nubia, so the score remains at 2-0 in Russia's favor. And actually was able to win the round this turn in South Africa, so the score is 5-2 in America's favor in South Africa. And then that's about it. The war in Vietnam continues to go poorly for France. Just a combination of lack of production and distance that France has to travel to get troops to the theater is proving too much for France. France doesn't have the rapid deployment options that America has via transports and overseas bases. Transports being both naval and air. And of course America has a much shorter distance to go to get to its theater. But other than that, that was it for the turn. There isn't going to be, China entering the Korean conflict brings a much needed major power to North Korea's side. The weight of South Korea, backed up by the second most powerful power on the board right now in terms of production, was proven too much for North Korea to handle, so China is a very much needed infusion of manpower and production. Other than that, that was 1951. So I'm not. There isn't much new things coming online for several turns, so we'll probably just come back with when the new event or new proxy war kicks off, because you guys probably don't want to hear 4 more videos of Korea. The Korean War is still going on, so we'll come back probably a couple turns down the road when something major happens, so we'll see you then.